Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who have not purchased the book, you need to go out and buy the book. For those of you who already have a book in your possession, you need to turn to the photographs and find a wonderful photo of Jack Devine, a much younger, slimmer, longer-haired Jack Devine, undercover in Santiago de Chile. Not for the in-house audience, but for the at-home audience, I am going to read just a little bit from the handbill so those at home can follow along with us. Many consider Jack Devine to be one of the legendary spymasters of our time. He was in Chile when Allende fell. He ran Charlie Wilson's war in Afghanistan. He had far much to do with Iran-Contra for his own taste, and he actually tried to stop it at one point. He caught Pablo Escobar in Colombia. He tried to warn George Tenet that there was a bullet coming back at him for Iraq. In 1986, he walked into our director, Bill Casey, and said, "We had a tremendous breakthrough yesterday. We deployed the Stinger missile and we shot down 3 helicopters." Casey thought for a minute and responded, "Jack, this changes it all, doesn't it?" Mr. Devine is a 32 career officer with the CIA. He began in the 1960s. He has a brand new book out called Good Hunting, an American Spymaster Story, which is on sale today, and he'll be glad to sign copies after today's session. He'll also take a Q&A. Jack Devine was already an established field operations officer when I joined CIA. And if you can keep a secret, I'll share a little bit of history with this small, intimate room. Jack Devine was the kind of clandestine services officer that I wanted to be when I grew up. Please join me in welcoming Jack Devine.
What Jim really meant to say at the end of that is he wanted to be like me because of that picture. And those of you that have gone to see American Hustle, they are plaid pants. I had a long hair and a mustache, and I could have easily at that point of time played in the role of the American Hustle. The fortunate thing, and by design I didn't put the color picture in because they were bright yellow, but Jim thought they were pretty fashionable in the time. And I believe Peter sort of tormented me once, saying, "Do you still have the pants for the museum?" You can't tell a book by its cover. And this isn't because of vanity. I love the cover of the book. And if you look at it, one of my employees took the book home and showed it to her young daughter. And she said, "Well, Mommy, I thought he was a nice man." And with a book, you have to have some fun, and there's some private jokes in here. The picture with the pants is funny because I've often been asked, how can you be a spy at 6'5"? We won't put the weight in, but at 6'5". And those of you, and there's a lot of practitioners in here, and it's wonderful to see them all. It's not about what you look like or your size. You get it done in the invisible space that exists. So that was sort of the private joke. But the picture has some roots that go back in my career. And as I said, I always thought I was a pretty affable person. And one day when I was in a Central American sort of country, because I can't say which country, but the ambassador was going up the elevator with Tom Polgar, former chief of station in South Vietnam, last one out. And Tom said to the ambassador, "You know, I want to send Devine out for that task." And the ambassador said, "You don't mean that big, sinister-looking guy." So I went home and I mentioned this to my wife, and I said, "I won't believe what the ambassador said. A big, sinister-looking guy." And she said, "Well, Jack, if I walked in and saw your face and didn't know you in your office, I'd turn around and walk out." So I went to a fellow that's in this room, and I believe he has his back to me because I asked him to. I don't want to look him in the eye. And I said, Jerry, what do you think? And he said, well, Jack, do you ever see how you make a point? Yes. So, however, what it really gets to in a way is the role-playing that operators undertake in their mission. And if you fast forward when I was running Latin America Division in the 1990-92 period, as you remember, President Clinton wanted to remove the dictators in Haiti. And Tony Lake was the director and Sandy Berg was the deputy director. So they called me down and they said, look, we want you to go down and tell the dictator to get out of town. Now this speaks to my IQ. I thought it was a great idea. You go to this country. There's the chief down there, however, and I'll add a little note on him at the end. But so I went down and the office had a report that the chief of police at the time had gone out to the voodoo doctor and put some powder on him. And he came because he was fearful, God knows why. But when I went down, he came to the chief's house. It was just the three of us. And there was water. He wouldn't touch the water. And then for those of you that engaged in poisoning, you realize that pumpkin soup is one of the best things to disguise poison in. In comes the maid with pumpkin soup. So I thought he was going to die on the spot. Now, when you get instructions to the White House on your script, it's usually, and it was in this case, now you say this, and he will say that. Then you say this, and he says that. I've never been in an operational meeting where you can script it that way. And I'm Irish. So when I went down in the room, I decided Bad Jack has to show up. So he was seated there, and I said, look, I want to tell you a story that a Latin friend of mine told me. And the Latin friend said, you Americans are like that train roaring down the track. And we're the Latins in the middle of the track. And we see you coming, and we puff out our chest. And we say, bring it on. And there's a very important lesson if you're working in Latin America. So I thought that was just the right poetic thing to lean across and say, you do not want to be that rooster. Now, I thought I made my point, but it wasn't Tony's script. And they didn't leave, even though I had a large bag and beside the menacing message. And a week later, Jimmy Carter was at the table negotiating with the general, and they were not budging. And he received a message from the President of the United States saying, you should leave the meeting. And he kept jawboning. And we were ready. The CIA was ready with its covert action capabilities, and the planes were taking off from the runway in Florida. And the spotter notified the negotiators, and they folded on the spot. And the dictator, and the chief of police specifically, went to Florida. Where else would you go if you're a dictator and you're on the run? And he got on the radio, and he said, oh, they sent this menacing guy down who threatened to kill me, my wife, and my children. Now, I promise you, I never said anything about the wife and children. So what I'm getting at is, there is a role-playing. I did a little piece for Homeland, the TV show, but not the show itself, but a promotional piece. And you've arrived in New York when you're in that 30-second thing in the back of a cab, and that was where it was. But one of the questions in the interview was, how much is, not covert action, how much is operational work like an actor? And I never thought about the question. But it is true, when you deal with foreign governments and foreign liaison, and you're dealing with assets and agents, you really do need to act, and you have to be a good one. If you get beyond, well, we should stick with the cover. Took me 2 years, again, there's an IQ issue here, to come up with 2 words, good hunting. And I don't need to explain it to people in the room, but it's a very old adage used by operators. And I think the first point where I see it noted in history is in Kipling's Jungle Book. But if you look